Well, we're back to continue this Jarrett associate presentation. This is all this is entertainment for me, and when it comes to the hierarchy of entertainment, number one is the Trimet Twitter feed. Okay, that's all the people tweeting about Trimet at any particular time. That's my most enjoyable activity. And the second after that, and it's a close second, is the Trimet scanner feed. That's one of my most favorite activities. It's just like watching a good TV show, really. So I really love that. And third on the list is these damn board meetings that are so boring that it's just hard to get through them. Anyway, we're back now after a little hiatus with him. Let me get comfortable here. And let's see where this is going. I mean, it's just going and going and going.
To get more places and have more options in their lives is a purely geometric fact. It goes from the design of the network, the pattern of frequencies and connections and lines and everything else. I can derive mathematically what that blob is going to look like. And if I stop there, I have an extremely high level of confidence because all I've talked about is geometry. We are sure that pi will have the same value in 2100.
I think we heard this. So
we will still
skip forward a bit here.
Day in 20 years when we have our product available, that we could have any reliable confidence that we're taking that factor into ridership prediction.
And you see, the whole problem is so nonlinear, you know. It's a sociological. It's a sociological problem. It's tremendously nonlinear. History is not linear, and as a result, the last 20 years of history may be a very poor guide to the next 20. You see, that's always the sort of philosophical problem I'm ultimately coming down on. I think that mostly what a study of recent history teaches us is extreme humility about prediction. You know. What were they using on Star Trek in the 23rd century? You know, they were using the Nokia flip phone. Right? Without even a screen.
Yeah, he's right.
And
isn't that funny?
Nobody anticipated. I mean, you can probably find somebody in the past who anticipated this, but that's just a matter of luck because people were predicting all kinds of things. You know, there was just nobody anticipated, you know, where exactly we'd be technologically now and what that would be doing to society.
Well, my sense is that the technology has already been developed and it's being released to society at its ability to absorb it. And so,
did you just hear what she just said? I was watching this before I turned this on, and she has just said there's a conspiracy theory going on that all of we already know we're being manipulated 24 hours a day. The masses are under constant manipulation by the oligarchy. And that includes advertising that we see constantly. That includes government propaganda, media releases. That includes mainstream media. We're being influenced 24 hours a day. So she's saying that the technology's been developed, but they don't release it until we can handle it. It's an interesting conspiracy theory coming out of her.
So actually, technologists know what is going to be available in the next 20 years.
But they don't know how people are going to react to it.
They don't know how people are going to react to it, and that's why they deliver it in such a...
No, they deliver it, okay, if they're looking at us as the masses, they want us, you know, we are the herd, okay? We are the sheep, the cattle, and we provide sustenance to the masters, okay? This is the bottom line of our existence. People really don't, that's a pretty horrible thing to come to reality to actually understand, but it really is true. So what they're really doing is, what can they sell us? How can they hook us in? How can they make us spend our money on whatever the hell they are developing? That's what she's talking about, you see. It's not what can we handle, it's what can they sell us? How can they hook us in?
Smaller portions. And that's why some of the futurists can talk about reliably what's going to happen in the future.
I think that the problem with that kind of futurism is it's just so hard for me, I've tried to get that distilled from just the sound of inventors promoting their vision. Right.
Right.
And their vision is people will fall in love with my invention.
Exactly.
That's the thing that's hard for me, is to get that separated.
Right, right. See, yeah, he's right.
But we know some things about the youth of today, and that I think is helpful in terms of factoring that into behavior.
Right.
Well,
the thing that's
no,
so tricky, though, at the same time.
He doesn't agree with her, obviously. She's saying everything is predictable, and he's saying it isn't. And I agree with him.
We, of sort of our general generation here, have to be cautious of the fact that, you know, it's so easy to look at your own 25-year-old kid and say, yeah, I remember being that age.
Yeah, yeah.
I know what that was like. I know what he'll want later in life.
Yeah.
You know, that's such a common impulse.
Right.
It's such an understandable impulse for human beings. And then I think that is part
Right.
of why we may have an exaggerated notion of how much we can actually predict what he's going
Yeah, this guy is good. I hate to say it, but he is good. He definitely knows his shit.
to be like and what he's actually going to want. And, you know, you go back into literature. I've got a literature background. A whole lot of literature has been written about the parent-child relationship, and the parent and the story is always about the parents' hope that in some way the child is going to turn out like them.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of the conflicts that can arise around that. And it's complex, and people have lots of different experiences of it. But over and over in literature, you find that sort of thing, that sort of aspect of the story coming up, that this child is somehow not what the parent had hoped for at this point, in some way. And so I think there's a certain sort of fact of human existence there, that process of children surprising their parents, that we always have to be aware of, and it's why I at least am very cautious about saying that I understand the young people of today, you know, that I understand the millennials, or that, you know, I understand any of that. Of course, I have a whole bunch of millennials working for me, and they all hate being called millennials. You know, they all hate the whole idea that they're similar to each other in some way.
Yeah.
And
Of course.
and they all want to surprise us in different ways. You know, that's kind of the challenge. So that's a big philosophical topic, and it's kind of a literary topic.
Well, and it really gets into ridership prediction.
It really does.
Ridership prediction. She doesn't know.
Discussions.
You know, God, look, we've already covered the ridership and the horror that is public transport. You know, these people have no right to even talk about ridership as long as the systems are so unreliable. It's really, you can't rely on public transportation. And if you don't live in Portland or on a MAX line, you certainly can't rely on it, okay? The only places you could maybe rely on it is on a light rail line or in Portland proper. Everywhere else, you have to have a car.
Like you indicated, if we're designing something today that we can't even deliver for 15 or 20 years.
That's exactly what they're doing.
We really have to factor in some sense of where we think behavior is going to be changed.
Either that, or you have to try on the idea that people will always want freedom, and that and people have always wanted freedom, and
they want freedom, and that's the one thing they don't get to have unless you're rich in America, is freedom. And you don't get freedom on a public transportation. You're completely at the mercy of the public transportation district.
people always want more opportunities in their life.
They want convenience.
Right.
And freedom.
And people are always going to have a sense of timeliness, right? That's transhistorical, right? Socrates and Plato did not get together in the would not have been able to have their dialogues in the Agora in ancient Greece if they did not show up at roughly the same time, right? And so there's that basic sense of timeliness and haste that's implied by our need to show up for one another, and that's transhistorical. And so that's what that's what freedom is really speaking of. It's not everything we want. It's not everything we're used to talking about. The only thing I can offer is I'm actually sure of it in a way that I know I'm not of that prediction. That's
this guy is pretty profound. I will admit it. When you watch him and you read him, it's some amazing stuff. I wish he wasn't so tied into the public transportation industrial complex, though.
That's kind of the challenge. This is big philosophical stuff. Any more questions about
philosophical stuff. He doesn't want to talk about
Anyone want to argue with me about this?
Yeah, me.
All right.
I want to argue with you, Jarrett.
So, now there's some math about what makes these blobs bigger. And what I want to do is step through that math a little bit.
That cocaine
I'm sure it's familiar to a lot of you, but it is the essence of why your service planning department proposes what they do.
Yes. Yes.
What maximizes access is a network of very frequent lines, forming a connected network that are reasonably fast and reliable, and here's the tough part, that are focused mostly on transit-friendly places. And I want to step through what I mean by each of these things. At this stage, too, I would like to hand out, Michelle.
Boy, he's got a whole goddamn fucking presentation here.
Oh, have you printed it for everyone? Oh, excellent. Okay, I had also printed some. Excellent. So the handout that's before you.
And this is why, and I'm going to say it again because this is one of my issues. This is why it's never going to, public transportation is never going to serve the needs of the people, because of these people. These are the people making all the decisions, and none of these people are actually stuck with the public transportation network. These are all elites, all of them. And this is the fundamental problem with our society. There's these people, not just public, everywhere you look. Just look at what went through Congress's tax plan. The tax plan is to serve the needs of the elites. These people here, they're not serving your needs, they're serving the needs of the elite. They're trying to pretend they're serving your needs, but they're not. If you've been paying attention, you understand what's really going on here.
I would like a copy. Michelle, do you have a copy? By the way, I want to introduce Michelle Poirot. She is not my personal assistant. She is actually our senior project manager and an excellent planner in her own right.
I like this guy. I wish he would have met me that one.
So I wanted to pass this out because this handout is sort of a map of the space we'll be exploring for the rest of this workshop.
Boy, this guy goes long.
The map is essentially a map of relationships between different kinds of choices that you face. And what's interesting about all of these choices is that it will turn out that although each of these choices is very interesting and easy to discuss in isolation, going in one particular direction on this choice tends to lead you toward a positive feedback loop that maximizes freedom. Going away from those choices tends to lead you away from that, although it may lead you to other wonderful things that you value. So this map is not saying about any of these choices that there's a right answer. It's instead referencing a sort of mathematical fact that there is this positive feedback loop that gets going if you move in the direction of the freedom maximizing choice. So let's talk about that. So I said I would talk through, handout looks like this. I have a few more, by the way, if anyone in the audience
look
wants
at this.
one. It's up to them.
See, look at these. See, these guys, these guys, that's the thing about these consultants, man. These professional consultants. They come up with these great charts, man.
Frequency comes first in building, in expanding those blobs for people.
Yeah.
And that's because frequency is a cubed benefit. It does three independent excellent things. It is reduced waiting, and let's remember right away that waiting doesn't mean standing at the bus stop anymore. You got the app, you show up at the bus stop 3 minutes before it goes. We've solved that problem. But waiting is still time spent not where you want to be. Right? If you live on an hourly bus route and you have to get to work at 8 a.m. and the bus gets there at 7:02 or 8:02, you're going to wait 58 minutes at your destination. You're still waiting. Right? Easier connections, that is to say, it is frequency that combines routes into a network so that it's easy to connect from one to the other.
Right.
And reduced impact of disruptions. Bus breaks down, another will be along soon.
Right.
So lines with higher frequency tend to not just have higher ridership, but higher ridership per unit of service. And let's look at this. So every time we do a transit plan, we dump all of their route-by-route ridership into a database and just keep growing it. And so this is a dot for every bus route in a whole bunch of different transit systems across North America. And what you'll notice is that higher frequency to the left is correlating with higher productivity. But remember, productivity is ridership divided by cost, and frequency is expensive. So if there were no relationship between frequency and ridership, you would actually expect a line going this way. You would expect that you would expect higher frequency to be pulling productivity down. Instead, it's associated with it going up. And that should be signaling to you that there is a nonlinear payoff to frequency. There's an exponential payoff to frequency. Now, this doesn't necessarily happen in time. It's not like if you double the frequency of a route, you necessarily get more than double the ridership. But it does mean that overall frequency deployed in the right places tends to correlate with higher ridership, even per unit cost. Now, this is also true in your own network. The highest performing routes in your own network, which are routes like Hawthorne Division, your new 122nd, but also some of the biggest, densest suburban corridors like TV Highway in Washington County. They're doing very, very well, and they're doing even better than you would expect if it were just a linear relationship. They're really way out there in terms of performance. And you see the same kind of curve when we look at your own data. In fact, I see this curve everywhere, basically. Every transit agency we work in, practically, that's the curve. And that's because, again, don't take it from the data, take it from the theory. It's because it's a cubed value. It's because frequency does three things that you should expect a nonlinear payoff from it. So this is why frequent network brands are so important. Pat yourselves or your forebears on the back. Trimet was really the first agency to put this brand out there, to start talking about the frequent network as a separate thing that is providing a higher level, such a higher level of service that you should know where it is. What we think about, I have been very involved in promoting frequent networks over the past, 15 years or so since Trimet came out with this one.
15-minute service is not frequent service. Okay, I'm sorry. That's the big myth. It's not frequent service. You have to have 10 minutes or less to even be considered frequent service, but this is, this is a Trimet.
And the messages have always been, if you're in a hurry, if you're somebody who can't wait for the bus, this is the network for you. And as you put this network out there, people will start to respond to that. The other thing that happens, of course, is that people start to make location decisions in response to frequent service being nearby. And over time, your transit service comes to be lined with people who appreciate it. What could be better in terms of a long-term good structure? Remember, too, that when I talk about that, I'm not just talking about development, I'm also talking about the normal churn of relocation within the existing built form, which is a lot of what you can start to get as you continue to promote the frequent network. Frequent networks can have huge roles in land use planning. Metro Vancouver in Canada had adopted a goal a while back that said over half of all population and jobs will be on the frequent network. This can be a really powerful sort of regional goal-setting tool. One of the interesting things that happened is that they achieved this goal faster than they had expected. And of course, they achieved it not just by expanding the frequent network, but also by growing on the frequent network, by more people moving to the frequent network. That's how you get to
Boy, got that sniff there. Quite a sniff you got there,
I
Jarrett.
recall hearing that in terms of residential and business development around transit lines, they are more likely to develop around light rail or track-related transit as opposed to bus, because bus routes can change. Is that actually true?
If you're talking about what the market is currently doing, I think that has been true. Obviously now we're lining Southeast Division Street with 3-story buildings, so somebody out there understands the value of just being on a good frequent bus. But here's what I would say about that. The market is an expression of what people currently think.
There is no market. Just let's get this clear. There is no free market. These developments are directed by government. Okay, these are all government developments. When they decide they're going to make Division a gentrified area, then they fund it with your tax money, and they're going to redo Division so that developers and all of those people can make money, and they'll stick all of the people they can stick over there. This is not free market, okay? There is no free market in the United States of America. I hope people do at least understand that.
We live in a society where most relatively fortunate people who are high-end real estate buyers aren't themselves transit users may not understand transit that well.
No, everybody's sitting at that table.
Loud signal about this is special transit, this is great transit. And rail has been that signal, the way of breaking through the noise. It's a little louder, right? And so it gets attention. And the notion that rail is associated with permanence does feel right. Because, yeah, they're putting down rails, they're not going to change. The notion that rail is associated with permanence is actually false. But it feels right.
What?
And that feeling is very powerful in the market.
What do you mean it's false?
It should be perfectly obvious to us that we used to have rails in the street all over the industrial district of inner Northwest Portland.
Yeah, that was
them all out
50 years ago.
We all know we had a whole bunch of tram systems in the early 20th century which were ripped out. So the rail wasn't permanent, was it?
Yeah, well, he's got a good point.
That's actually not, and what's being missed there, and it's a very common mistake that people coming from built environment professions will make, like architects and developers, is that for them, costs are mostly capital costs. So they think about building something like a road or a building, and then it's there, and then it's permanent. Yeah. And so they project that onto transit, but that's not how transit works. Of course, transit cost is mostly operating cost. And so just because you have some infrastructure doesn't mean it's permanent unless the service makes sense permanently, right? And of course, we have all kinds of abandoned rail lines because the service stopped making sense. The rail is still there, but what does that give you?
That's the heavy rail.
So, true permanence lies in the service always making sense, and that lies in the land use pattern. And so when I say that, to me, the Division Street transit line is at least as permanent as, say, the East Side Loop of the Portland streetcar, I'm saying because the market will always be there, because look at the built environment, right? And that's the permanence that should matter to us. Now, over time, I think that this awareness is starting to percolate through the built environment professions, and that's going to cause a more sophisticated view. In fact, I'm watching key urbanist leaders like Brent Todderan or Jeff Speck picking up this line and starting to talk more about buses and about frequent buses. So I think that, that's sort of a generational process of change in terms of how much do you really need rail as opposed to just frequent bus. Because
Right. We're going to stop there. I mean, this is just going on and on and on. I don't know. I mean, there's 3 more hours here. I can't imagine it's all him talking. This is all very nice, but the future of public transportation is very uncertain right now with the Republicans in charge. I really don't know how this is going to end, but we just had this massive tax cut for the rich and the corporations, and I don't have a good feeling. I haven't had a good feeling in quite a long time, though, and things keep chugging along somehow. But those of us of somewhat intelligent minds realize at some point this party's going to end, and it's going to be nasty. It's going to be bad. It can only end in actually world war, because that's what always happens when economies blow. The so-called, quote, leaders, unquote, the leaders that we supposedly choose, which we don't, are representatives of the oligarchy, and the oligarchy can revitalize economies by having us kill each other. I mean, we live in a morally corrupted world, unfortunately. Anyway, he's interesting to listen to, isn't he? He's a fascinating man. Yeah, it's too bad he wouldn't meet with me. I would have loved to talk to him one-on-one.